Welcome to Subject to Blackout. My name is Timo, and with me, as always, is Mike from the Name Taking Podcast. Mike, how you doing?
Good, Tim.
Good to hear. We are recording this after watching a couple days ago the 2021 Nic Cage movie Pig.
Yep.
And Mike, we briefly had a conversation the other day about this film before the podcast, and it sounds like we might have taken away different things from this. Mike, what were some of your thoughts on Pig?
I don't know. I don't know. And one thing I do think is ridiculous is that it has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. And like that's 2% away from Citizen Kane, 3% away from Paddington Bear 2, Paddington 2 Bear.
As we talked about,
what is Face Off? Face Off is so Face Off on Rotten Tomatoes. There we go. Face Off is what's that remade? Face Off 92%. This was not a better movie than Face Off.
Yes, it is.
No. John Travolta wasn't even in there. Not even as a cameo. Not even as like a...
John Travolta played the pig. It was all CGI'd in post, but he was the pig. No, I said God. The other day, oh my God, it's a truffle. Oh my God, I found another one. I'm really good at this. Hopefully no one kidnaps me. Also, gigantic spoilers. What we just said, that there is a literal pig in this movie, and that the pig gets kidnapped. Both things happen in the first 5 minutes. If you haven't seen this movie, go see this movie. I thought it was really good. Mike thinks it's less good than I think it is.
It was fun. It was weird. I wouldn't call it a good movie. I would call it a movie.
Okay. I would first like to...
I would call it a bad movie.
I would like to rebuttal that the reason the Rotten Tomato score is what it is because they kind of view movies as a binary. Is it voted positively by a critic or negatively by a critic? And then that's where they get their percentage from. How many people had positive reviews of this film? Of course, of course, this film was going to have mostly positive reviews. It's kind of snobby at times, and I think also well written movie that looks visually very beautiful. So I don't there weren't going to be a lot of critics out there who were going to find reasons to give this movie a bad review. The performances are good, cinematography is good, and I think the story is good.
Fair enough. The performances are good. Nicolas Cage does not phone it in like he did with the 15 direct-to-stream movies that he did to recoup the money from Dinosaur Bones and Castles that he bought during the 2000s on all of that National Treasure money. So for a lot of those performances, he kind of like phoned it in and just showed up like, "Hey, I'm motherfucking Nic Cage. Let's get this shit done." In this, he was sort of like genuinely trying to channel his creative energy. It was a vehicle for Nicolas Cage to be as artistic as he wanted. And I mean, he does have a Best Actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all make fun of Nic Cage for being kind of a wild card, but he is like a very capable and accomplished actor who has been like an A-lister for 4 decades.
Yeah, I mean, he does some silly movies, especially recently, but even before the financial troubles that led him to just do anything that was offered to him, like he would do some weird movies that you're like, Nic Cage is in this? Like National Treasure was kind of one of those films where it's like, this kind of seems beneath him.
Yeah. He would do like The Weatherman, but he would also do The Wicker Man. He would do Captain Corelli's Mandolin, but he would also do Face Off. He would do Raising Arizona, but he would also do Gone in 60 Seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wide gamut of films that he is apparently willing to do, and that persists and is exacerbated by his recent financial circumstances. So,
so in part, I was anticipating this to be part of the Nicolas Cage recoups his expenses period.
And
it
I
seems to
kept
be
trying to warn you that it was
yeah.
not going to be that. At
But
least
then
not in the way that some of the more obvious versions of that period of his filmography were. Some of them were obvious cash grabs by Nic Cage in a movie that otherwise would never have a star of his caliber.
Exactly. Yeah. It was not that kind of movie. It was meant to be a different kind of movie. But the other thing that I think threw me for the entire thing was in the first 5 minutes, we see this random dude, this kind of like solitary guy, silently sort of like going about his day with his pet companion. And like the first thing, like the first thing I thought of was like, okay, so they're just somebody sat down. And they were like, wouldn't it be great if we just remade John Wick, but instead of Keanu Reeves and a beagle, it was Nicolas Cage and a pig? And someone was like, I'll produce that. So like the first 5 minutes are like John Wick. And then his fucking pig gets kidnapped in the same way. They're not Russians. They're just sort of like...
I believe it gets pig-napped.
Yes. I apologize. That was not very thoughtful of me. Yes.
Super uncool of you.
So, and then he goes on kind of not like a gun rampage, but an emotional rampage in order to get his pig back. So honestly, like, I saw it as being a weird kind of retread of John Wick.
Well, all right. So I have one more point before we get.
No one gets shot in the face either.
That is true. Shot in the face with maybe some delicious like foie gras,
baguettes,
like in the eye. Yeah, like as you're biting into it, it's just so juicy.
Yeah.
No, I would like to hit on one more point before we go on further. Is that like when you look at the Metacritic score, which just takes reviewers and puts them on a 100-point scale. So if it's a 2.5 out of 5 stars, that's not viewed as a positive or negative review. That's just given a 50%. When I think we looked it up, it was like an 82 on Metacritic. And that to me makes way more sense, is that this is a generally well-liked movie that, maybe a couple people are up for some awards, but like Nic Cage is not getting an Academy Award nomination for this film. He doesn't do enough.
Pig is going to be Best Supporting Actor. Like, it's going to be like a sleeper, like when Anthony Hopkins got it for being in like Silence of the Lambs for like 30 seconds. Give it to Anthony Hopkins. He nailed it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would recommend that if you're willing to watch a movie that is going to basically toy with you, like you just said, that it might be a new John Wick, and it is in fact not at all what John Wick is. And I think there's a scene pretty early on in the movie where it's like, hey, this is what you think this is going to be, this movie is going to be about, and it is not a John Wick movie. And that's the one scene that really kind of rubbed up against me because it's so weird and stupid. But that was like the underground fight scene.
Bum fight scene. Yeah, exactly. So, but that's where it attempts the same kind of urban fantasy element that John Wick really like leaned into. And whereas like John Wick like doubled down on world building, and that made it seem authentic and sincere enough that you're willing to roll with it, this movie like kind of touches on it and then backs away from it, almost kind of like in a self-aware sort of insecure way. And like that was something.
Oh, I didn't see it as insecure.
Yeah.
I saw it as an intentional way to say like, this is not what this movie is about. This movie isn't about revenge. And that leads me to what this movie is actually about, is
love,
dealing with grief.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think your two main characters, Nic Cage's character, is obviously dealing with grief, and he's secluded himself after a life as a chef in Portland. He's clearly secluded himself. Right. It can't even listen to a tape of his former wife, recorded for him. And then we have the secondary character who is trying to become a hotshot in the Portland Portland
fine dining scene.
Yeah, which is not a thing, I don't think.
Yes,
because he lives in the shadow of his father, who's like the king of all of it. And then
which is
he's
also not a thing.
also correct.
Yeah.
And he is also dealing with the fact that his mother attempted and failed to kill herself, it seems. Is what I took away from that, because
Yeah.
not a lot is given to that, but it's clear that the son is avoiding dealing with that, and even his father is avoiding dealing with that trauma. So I viewed this movie as this movie seemed to have a very strong opinion that it was trying to put forward on processing grief and how it basically, my takeaway from the movie was the central thesis was you can't avoid processing and dealing with grief. You can only delay it, and you can only move forward once you process it. And I found that for about 3 or 4 central characters in this movie, there were really unique and interesting ways in which they deal with that central thesis of processing grief and processing loss, in order to move on and live your life in a better way. I thought, and we can get into more detail later, but I thought you could see that with both the son and the father characters, the Nic Cage character, and even like the chef that he absolutely tears down in the restaurant that, ironically, after we saw Black Orpheus last episode, references the Orpheus myth, which that story is very much about loss and grief and someone not being able to handle the loss of someone and then therefore losing her forever, all over again. So, I mean, yeah, there were things that did not work for me, and specifically the one weird fight scene. I think I understand why they did it, but it still seemed stupid to me. It felt like you could have done that in a more believable, more realistic fashion. But I really dug what the movie was trying to tell me.
I see where you're coming from. Here's what they did. Here's what they did. What I appreciate, because on one hand, I believe there was like inconsistent character development, and in the sense that just based on the ways that characters were interacting with one another and the types of information they were revealing about their backgrounds, I still did not feel that some of their actions were fully reflected in what the audience was offered. So, like, this, like, younger dude is what? Treating like homeless Nicolas Cage like a father figure because he doesn't have a father figure, but he does have a father figure and he really wants his approval. Like, I feel like that really could have been developed differently. So,
I think.
Hang on.
All right.
I listened to Tim, but here's what I appreciate that they didn't do, because I do feel like, and I've complained about this before, that a lot in the era of Netflix, shows and movies will rely on flashbacks in order to explain what the characters should just be explaining through their dialogue in the present. And I'm glad that we never had to rely on a bunch of flashbacks of like Nicolas Cage in his prime. I think it was interesting to have it simply like implied. We didn't really have to see it. We didn't necessarily have to see his interactions with his wife. So I thought that was a good way to do it. I thought that was brave. But I didn't feel like the pacing and the character development was really able to carry some of the things that were going on screen. I thought the acting was good. I just didn't necessarily think that the structure of it was like really, really all there.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. I think this movie does sort of hand wave. It gives you a couple of things about a couple of characters, and you're just supposed to take it at face value that these are shorthand for character development,
right?
In some aspects, just so that, and I mean, hey, can we just applaud this movie for being a tight hour and a half?
But that's the thing. I think you could have added 15 minutes and addressed the types of things I'm talking about right now.
Yes, absolutely. I just didn't feel like it was necessary. Like when you are talking about the son character, and his relationship with Nic Cage, I think a lot of that like was kind of symbolized by the fact that he's listening to these tapes about classical music and why it's superior and why you should like it.
Right.
And someone who likes classical music doesn't listen to those fucking tapes.
Right.
Like they appreciate the music and they like it for the reasons that they enjoy it. This kid who is trying to, you know, be like his dad and make a name for himself in the food industry in Portland. He's the relationship he's building with Nic Cage to me was symbolized by those tapes in that like he wants to work with Nic Cage because he wants to, he thinks that that's the Beethoven of this Portland scene, that he has to have the best and be the best instead of being like authentic to oneself. So it kind of like explains like, oh, why does he have this relationship with Nic Cage? Because he finds out that he's this famous, chef, and he's like, oh, well, I want to be a purveyor of fine things. This is a fine thing. I must therefore build a relationship with this. And I think that does a lot. It did a lot for me to just kind of be like, all right, fair enough. The reason why he wants to be a figure in this food scene, even though his dad is actively trying to fuck him at every turn, is a little underplayed. You have you're very correct there. But I felt like the movie was very early on. I understood that the message I was taking away from the film was about dealing with grief. So I didn't really care why he was trying to do that, because I was more interested in the fact like that his mother, he explains to Nic Cage that she killed herself. She committed suicide. But then we find out later that she's actually still alive. But, that's shown where he's standing outside of her hospital or hospice or whatever, or outside of her care room, and he won't even go in. And then a nurse walks in. So it's not like he was barred from going in. He doesn't want to confront what happened to his mother. So it was stuff like that that I found more useful to taking away from this movie what I thought the writer and director was trying to give me. The shortcuts that it was taking to advance the plot, I didn't mind, because I was just looking for more plots along the dealing with grief sort of theme.
That's fair enough. I mean, one issue that I this might be on me, and I'm going to draw on. This was Roger Ebert's review for Beauty and the Beast, actually, but
Okay.
that there isn't some universal criteria against which to judge all movies. That to some extent you're judging a movie against its own what it's attempting to accomplish, or what it seems to be setting out to do. And you're also kind of contextualizing a movie in a particular history, whether you're looking at different narrative points, you're looking at different actors, you're looking at different cinematography and kind of pacing and developmental techniques. And you're also thinking about genre. Is it a children's movie? Is it a horror movie? And in that sense, I'm not sure where exactly I would place this movie. One of the reasons why I think I might be having a hard time evaluating it is because I'm actually not really sure where it's contextualized.
Yeah, I mean, it does certainly, again, if that weird fight scene is doing what I assumed it was doing, which was telling me, hey, this is not an action movie. Like, this is not going to be an epic fight scene. Instead, much like his life, Nic Cage is just going to take a beating, and he's just going to sit there and he's going to take it, and then he'll move on. And so I don't know if I'd call this, like, because there are those weird kind of tonal shifts. I wouldn't call this like an art film. This isn't like Black Orpheus,
Right.
but this is more of a film that's trying to, put forth a director's and writer in in this particular case, uh, trying to put forth their opinion about a subject. And um, yeah, I struggle to find a film that is explicitly just that. Like this film is explicitly just a saga about grief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, this is the type of thing that we were talking about last week with Black Orpheus, where it's like, yeah, like everything about this is beautiful, but like there's just not enough there as far as themes and plot and you know, uh sort of, you know, the what a writer would bring to a film. Whereas this is very much the opposite, where this is very much to me, yeah, it's very nicely shot, and it looks nice, but it's, you know, it's not going for visuals, it's going for story
Mm-hmm.
and themes, um, and I appreciate that personally much more when trying to view a film. As far as the rest of the film goes, I think what happens with the son and the father kind of storyline, the way that that wraps up, in that Nic Cage just helps the son cook a meal that clearly was the last or a very important meal that this guy had with his wife before, you know, things took a turn for worse and she ended up, you know, attempting suicide. And that just bringing him to tears, confronting his loss, and then Nic Cage finding out that his pig is dead, and which is not funny, but it sounds funny when you say it.
Yeah.
But him just crumpling to the floor. Clearly, it's not just about the pig. It's him having to confront loss, having to therefore confront the loss of his wife, the loss of his career. There's a lot in this movie that happens in that one scene, and I just thought Nick's performance in there, Adam Arkin's performance in there, and then Alex Wolff, who plays his son, who throughout the film, all did tremendous jobs of just emoting and finding the right level to take this. Because, I mean, this could have been a very silly pig. This could have been a very silly
Could have been
film.
some pig there,
It could have
Charlotte.
been some pig. Because yeah, it's about a guy and his pig, and at one
Yeah.
point he's like, "I love my pig," and we were having a very fun time laughing
Yeah.
at some ridiculous parts of this movie.
Right. It's high
Um,
praise.
it's high praise. But
This is a
yeah,
very
no,
talented pig. It's high praise.
that'll do, pig. That'll do. Yeah, no, I thought that the direction and the performances were just like pitch perfect, because this could have gotten silly really really fast. And even with those performances, I feel like it kind of did get a little silly, but it always kind of reeled it back in and grounded it, which I was surprised, because after that almost fight scene, I thought like this is going off the rails.
I mean, that's what I think what we were alluding to earlier, that Nicolas Cage's career, at least from the late 80s up into the 2000s, that there was like a certain degree of balance, that he would do these kind of weirder projects like as an action star. And it's odd now saying that Nicolas Cage was once like an action star. But remember, he was considered for the role of Superman, as we talked about. He was
Who's in Jerry Bruckheimer's The Rock?
he was in The Rock. Um, he was a Ghost Rider.
He was.
So he was in 2 National Treasure movies. So yeah, he was an
in
action
Con
star.
Air.
He was in Con Air. Yeah, we keep remembering all these. He was kind of like an action star, and he was kind of somebody who did sort of funny weird stuff. But then he also did very kind of like run of the mill, kind of like Oscar bait, kind of like emotionally like drama. But for the last 10 or 15 years or so, he's kind of become this like brand in the same way that like Jeff Goldblum is, where everyone sort of has ignored all of the serious drama that he's done and is just focused on like Nicolas Cage is like a weird dude with like Cage Con And again, the 15 movies that he did to recoup all that money that he spent. So within the kind of recent context of his filmography, but also in his current brand, I wasn't prepared for something that was going to be serious Nic Cage. I was prepared for the like, one true God Nic Cage, where his like crazy person face is like on a pillow or like on a fuckload of gifts. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
in some ways, I'm wondering if he's gotten too far into the hole of being like Nicolas Cage. I wonder if he needs to step back, try and be, you know, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I mean, someone else who's gone through that and have very similarly had financial issues is Johnny Depp, and he's
Yeah.
gotten, and without talking about like off-camera stuff, like
Oops.
yeah, I don't even know what's going on there. I don't really care, but like he just got to this point where he was like off screen, he was wearing 15 braces and had very eccentric facial hair and rings and pashminas and shit all over him. And then he's just
Pashmina.
like,
Nice.
what what if I just do that in every film now? What if I'm just eccentric in every film, and me and Tim Burton, and I'll be a whiter shade of white with every progressive film.
And then Tim Burton was like, but can Helena Bonham Carter be in this too? And he was like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Let's do
that's absolutely fine. And it just, he kind of became a joke of himself to the point where like that to me just felt like somebody who was like surrounded by yes men who no one ever told him no, and he just kept doing these weird things to the point where everyone's like, all right, we don't like you anymore because you're weird, and you won't stop being weird. And he's like, but everybody loved it up until yesterday. And it was like, no, we didn't.
Yeah, we just reached our limit.
Whereas like Nic Cage, I still feel, again, before all of these I Need Money movies, he was still doing these weird films, but they were never like cheap. His cheap ones
Right.
were the ones where his performance felt cheap, were always like the big blockbustery ones. Con Air, he didn't even work on his accent. Like the National Treasure movies stink. I'm sorry. They're bad movies that I
They're
don't like.
classic. I would
I
watch the
don't like them.
hell out of those movies. Sean Bean's in them. He dies.
No way. Sean Bean dies.
He dies in them.
It's his thing. Yeah, so like, but he'd still every once in a while, I mean, even a couple of years ago he did that like Mandy thing,
Yeah.
which got a bunch of praise and critical acclaim, and not just for his performance but also for the visuals of the movie. And so I don't know, I see Nic Cage as a guy who is weird but has these performances in him. And yeah, I mean, I thought he really knocked it out of the park with this one. And I tried to warn you, this was not going to be a silly film. Um, and it was going to be a serious film that a lot of people were treating as noteworthy. But those movie money, or those money needing movies were just too much of a sway on you, obviously.
Yep. Yep. I mean, it's my fault. The pandemic happened, and I was like, let's watch all of these because I have nothing else going on.
Do you who has seen more of those movies, you or Nic Cage?
I don't know. I saw Mom and Dad, which was actually kind of ridiculous. I mean, they were all ridiculous. In that one, it's Nicolas Cage, Selma Blair. Basically, there's like some kind of The Happening thing, like plans to take revenge on people, but what really ends up happening is it makes adults want to kill all their children. And so it's like it's character study, Nicolas Cage, Selma Blair as like zombies that want to kill their entire family, barricaded into their basement by their children. And like the whole movie is like, let us out so we can like fucking kill you. Like it's like the whole movie. It's crazy. It's like The Birds, but instead of birds, it's like Nicolas Cage and Selma Blair. I totally recommend it. Mom and Dad. So, and the other one I really remember, yeah. Okay, so Nicolas Cage he's like a trucker, and some kind of crap happens. Anyway, he starts sleeping with this woman, and then his dead ex-wife possesses this woman's hot daughter, and then he starts sleeping with both of them. and it kind of resolves. The resolve part not important. The middle part's great. So I was assuming something like that based on his current work.
Yeah. And to be fair, to you, he's kind of earned that.
Yeah. Also remember
doubt.
he's going to be in the upcoming Tiger King movie as the Tiger King. And I did point out to you the other day that he is in the upcoming The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring himself, Nicolas Cage.
As himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are worrisome projects. After what I thought was a terrific performance in Pig, a very grounded, realistic performance in Pig.
Yeah, so I wasn't ready.
And now he's gonna play a cartoon version of himself and just be like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, it's high praise. So I wasn't ready. I could eat a peach for hours. Yeah, so I wasn't ready for serious Nicolas Cage. So that might be on me, but it's like, what else was I gonna do?
I don't know. Either way, we had a blast watching this movie. We had way more fun than this movie is fun.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I want to bring you joy, but we found joy.
Again, this movie is not.
About grief. I don't know.
Yeah, this movie is about grief, so it's not exactly an uplifting, hilarious rom-com. It's pretty dour and sad, and everyone's sad in it, whether they're admitting it to themselves or otherwise. Dude, the scene where he crushes the chef who has the very successful restaurant, Eredice, he just crushes that guy by being like, "What did you actually want to do? You told me. Do you remember?" He's like, "I don't know. Everybody likes this restaurant. I'm having a great time." He's like,
a pub.
"You wanted a pub? That's high praise." But he just tears that guy down to the point where that guy's like crying, and losing his shit. Like that was an awesome scene. But yeah, no, I would highly recommend this movie to anyone who's willing to sit and be contemplative about a movie and what it has to say, and ignore the fact that Nic Cage is not hamming it up. He's just giving a classic routine Nic Cage performance.
Yes.
Well, Mike, that does it for us on Pig. Why don't we take a quick little break and we'll come right back with some more. This week on Subject to Blackout. On the upcoming episode of Subject to Blackout, Mike and I were so inspired by the recent release of the Matrix 4 trailer that we decided to dig back into the Keanu Reeves filmography. So are we watching the original Matrix? Hell no! No, we've decided to review the terrifically wild and weird 1992 horror romance, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Produced and directed by Francis Ford Coppola, this movie is a retelling of the 1897 novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. This will be my first time viewing this legendary film, filled with cool retro special effects, as well as some over-the-top performances by the likes of Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, and of course Keanu himself, trying on a British accent no less. So stream Bram Stoker's Dracula for free on Pluto and join us for our discussion on the next Subject to Blackout. All right, Mike, now that we've discussed Pig, what are some other things that you have been consuming pop culture-wise?
I've been rereading Dune in preparation for seeing Dune and talking about Dune.
Yeah, I think, obviously it's not coming up in the next couple weeks, but I think in our immediate future, there's going to be a lot of Dune-related content. I actually follow someone on Twitter who went to a film fest and saw Dune, and it came away, they said it wasn't perfect. It was clearly part one of a two-part thing, but they were like, it was better than I expected and better than I hoped, he said. So that gives me hope that it, A, is going to look stunning, and B, hopefully be really, really good. Because I believe Dune from 1984, not a very good movie.
Yeah, it's trash. We'll talk about why.
You and I have both seen it. Not a very good movie. Jodorowsky's Dune, which is a documentary about a planned Dune epic. Yeah, it was like 6 hours long.
Development hell.
Yeah, and
10 years.
just all all these amazing artists and
Salvador Dali was going to be in it. The Rolling Stones were going to be in it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the artwork that ended up being used for Alien was developed for Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yes, some people who went on to have incredibly influential careers started on a movie that was never even made.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful documentary. I believe the last time I saw it was on Amazon's streaming service, which you can watch. But I think we're going to talk about a little bit in more detail coming up closer to the arrival of Dune. But yeah, I've never read the book, so I've heard nothing but good things.
Just like tons of quotable lines. I'm looking forward to a movie that's like 3 hours of people just talking about spices. Desert Planet Arrakis. Here's the Mind Killer. It's gonna be like fucking.
Pig almost could have been 3 hours about talking about spices, but it took a different turn.
I would have just watched 3 hours of Nicolas Cage in the woods, tracking down truffles with a pig, in silence.
Maybe there's a pig prequel, a pigquel that could be made called Pre-Pig.
Piglet.
Yes. Yes. All right. Nic Cage, you need money. We're doing Nick. A pig prequel called Piglet. And it's not about loss or grief or dealing with any of that. It's about finding truffles.
It's going to be like Scarface, but instead of cocaine, it's like a ton of truffles and pig. Instead of a machine gun. Instead of Miami.
He's just got a big pile of truffle shavings on his desk. I'm out of my mind on truffles.
The Limit is playing in the background.
Yeah. I'd watch that movie. Yeah. I'd watch that movie. One of the things that we've done pop culture wise is actually last Friday we went to Pitchfork.
We did.
And we saw live music.
We did see live music
in person.
How about that?
It was wild. It was good to be back. What were some of the thoughts and your takeaways from our day at the park?
Young people don't have as much like hardcore kill yourself music that I remember classically. Didn't hear a whole lot of distortion pedals. A little bit bummed about that. That's okay.
I found that the crowd was not nearly as young as I feared.
Yeah, that was great.
That was really nice. There were lots of people in their 30s just being super chill about things.
Being chill. Yeah.
And I really liked that. That's one of the reasons I was super excited to not go to Lollapalooza this year, because it seemed like that was going to be a fiesta of children doing drugs.
Goddamn children doing drugs with their TikToks.
with their fucking TikToks and their iPhones. No. I thought, it was. I was worried, like I said, that it was just going to be a super young crowd, and I was just going to feel old as fuck. But I did not. I felt like this was very much a festival, especially Friday. Kids are in school. School year has already started here in Chicago, so I think a lot of them couldn't get out for the first day, and I very much enjoyed that because I thought a lot of the performances we saw were just kind of like hang and chill out, like, because like I don't remember when Animal Collective's set started, and I certainly don't remember anything that they played, but when it ended I was like, oh, that was an hour, all right, cool. There was nothing in particular about that set that was attention grabbing.
Right.
But it sure did make for a nice time while we were sitting there drinking water and beer and eating some tacos. So,
yeah, there you go. Wasn't that bad?
Yeah, it was a perfectly relaxed atmosphere. Yeah, I think you said that was your first festival since you went to one in Japan years ago.
Right. And that would have been 2017, maybe.
Yeah, that was my first fest since probably 2013, 2014. So it has been a minute, but it was good to see live music again. All right, Mike. Well, that does it for this week on Subject to Blackout. I want to thank you as always for joining me. And for those of you listening along, you can head on over to subjecttoblackout.com to reach out to us. where you can also find all of our links to our socials, including Instagram, Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on any of those. And lastly, as always, you can find Mike on Instagram and Twitter at NameTakenPodcast. Mike, I want to thank you for joining me.
It's high praise. It's high praise.